Ready? All right. Call this meeting to order. It's a regular meeting of the Huron City Council for Tuesday, August 11th. Please stand for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And clerk, please call the roll.
Crawford. Here. Klaus.
Here.
Taft. Martino.
Here.
Dyke.
Here.
Hardy.
Here.
Hagan.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we excuse Mr. Taft from tonight's meeting.
Discussion on the motion. Please call the roll.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Hagan.
Yes.
Crawford. Yes. Klaus.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes. Next, I need a motion to approve minutes from July 14th, 2022, the regular meeting, July 29th, 2020, of the City Council work session, and July 29th of the regular council meeting. Mr. Hart.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular council meetings July 14th and July 29th and the July 29th council work session as presented.
Discussion? Please call the roll.
Hardy.
Yes.
Hagan.
Yes.
Crawford. Yes. Klaus.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Madam Clerk, do you have any communications?
Yes, I have one.
Okay.
This is an email from Alicia Rochon. She lives at 28 Middle Avenue. I'm writing as a very concerned citizen, a homeowner, and also a registered VRBO owner. I have a neighbor who lives at 27 Lake Ave and is an unregistered VRBO Airbnb renter. She has tenants that go to dog shows, and our homes are very close together. The yards are contiguous. My biggest concern is the fact that her tenants have animals that run into our yard, go to the bathroom in our yard, run across the front of the lake, and are extremely disruptive and even at times threatening. It is to the point that last summer we were held captive in our own home, and we have lived there for 26 years, as we were concerned to go in our yard and deck to enjoy our waterfront view. As the RVO owner myself, I actually have it completely fenced in, and my biggest requirement is no smoking and absolutely no pets. To bring in outside animals that are almost always not kept under control, especially since these people are there for only a few days, and do not really care about the homeowners who live there, my biggest concern might be, and input as a homeowner is to please prohibit guests from bringing in their animals. I can understand if there might be one animal under 10 pounds, but that is never the case. I'm asking that this be presented in council. Again, I am a Huron business owner and resident. I sincerely hope you see the importance of my concerns. That's all.
Okay. We will take that into consideration. There's a committee working on some issues with vacation rentals. Mr. Spafford, I believe we have a leash law.
We do have a leash law, yeah.
Yeah, maybe in the meantime, you can reach out to these people and let them know we have that in place.
Amen.
All right, thank you. Under old business, any updates on Showboat property or the ConAgra?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. First off, the Showboat property, a quiet title action lawsuit was filed last week in Erie County Court of Common Pleas. I don't have any information other than that. It's filed, and now we go through the court process. I will keep council informed of any updates, developments in that particular case, but right now the case has been filed, and so we're kind of in the tube, if you will. ConAgra land swap, Mike and I met last week. We're making really good progress. We looked at the maps, we looked at the split maps. There's a few things that we need yet. As part of the lot split is consolidation, legal description. So once the split is done, we can have the property deeded to the respective parties and have new parcels with new permanent parcel numbers. So that's moving along. Mike has to call out for the engineer to get the consolidation legals and plat prepared. Just yesterday I prepared proposed deeds for the transfers, sent them to Mike after we get approval, and I think we'll circulate them to ODNR to keep that process moving. Shortly after we get the deeds nailed down and after we have all the maps that we need in our possession, we'll be off the planning commission for a lot split. I don't think it's going to be that much longer. We're making good progress. The documents, I reported at the last meeting as well, the documents have been approved. It's really a function of signature now after we get the real estate pieces squared away.
Any questions for the auditor? Thank you, it's been a long time coming. Next on the agenda, the new business, ordinance number 2020-18.
Mr. Mayor, I move the three reading rule be suspended and ordinance number 2020-18 be placed on its first reading.
Discussion on first reading, please, first reading. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dyke?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagy?
Yes.
Crawford? Yes. Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2020-18, an ordinance determining to proceed with the improvement of certain public places in the city by lighting and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, I move that this be placed as an emergency.
Discussion on the emergency measure. Please call the roll.
Dyke?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagy?
Yes.
Crawford? Yes. Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes. Mr. Smith.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening, council. So this is the last of the legislative processes as part of the lighting assessment. So again, just a reminder, in terms of this latest arrangement, it's a 3-year property tax assessment to the tune of 0.73 mils, a reduction from 1.04 of the current lighting assessment. Once this is finalized, there is one last notice period, and I believe our deadline to get this to the county auditor is September 14th, if memory serves. Once that's finalized, this will be added to the property tax duplicates going into future funding years. So at this point in time, this is, like I said, the last legislative process for city council. We did not receive any objections to the last round of notices, therefore it didn't have to go through the equalization board process. So I'll take any other additional questions. The next two pieces of legislation actually cover this topic. So sorry with council, I'll leave this as my summary for both.
Any questions? Discussion? Please call the roll for final adoption.
Dyke?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagy?
Yes.
Crawford? Yes. Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes. Next is ordinance number 2020-19. Mr.
Mr. Mayor, I move that three reading will be suspended and ordinance number 2020-19 be placed on its first reading.
Discussion on first reading. Please call the roll.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagy?
Yes.
Crawford? Yes. Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2020-19, an ordinance levying special assessments for the improvement of certain public places in the city by lighting and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, I move that ordinance number 2020-19 be placed as an emergency measure.
Any discussion on the emergency measure? Please call the roll.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagy?
Yes.
Crawford? Yes. Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Any questions for the city manager on this? Hearing none, please call the roll for final adoption.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagy?
Yes.
Crawford? Yes. Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Next is resolution number 2020-52.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Strong.
I'd like to move that resolution number 2020-52 be placed on its first reading and the three reading rule be suspended, please.
Discussion on the first reading. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Heggie.
Yes. Resolution number 2020-52, a resolution authorizing the city manager to award the bid and enter into an agreement with RMH Concrete and Foundations, Inc. for labor and materials related to the Rye Beach Park Storm Sewer Project in an amount not to exceed $68,999.40.
Thank you. So this project was initially conceived, I think, about 2 years ago, working with Rye Beach Homeowners Association on potential to improve drainage near the park along Shore Drive. Currently, that area is significantly underserved, experiences quite a bit of flooding. So I wanted to commend Doug Green specifically, who's worked really hard on this project, and specifically just from a community input standpoint, has partnered with the Rye Beach Homeowners Association really well on this, and they were able to come to what's ultimately going to be a vastly improved situation from a stormwater perspective, as well as was able to kind of balance the needs and wants of the community and the neighborhood specifically. Initially, this project was included in the 2020 budget at initial construction cost of $90,000, with inspection anticipated likely to take us to $100,000 total project. As you guys know, we did put a lot of the projects that didn't have dedicated funding sources on hold due to COVID and not knowing the full financial impact of the city. There were some improvements initially considered as part of the US 6 Phase 1 project that we ultimately weren't successful in getting bids that met certain DVE requirements with the state. Therefore, we're going to reutilize some of those additional freed up line items within that project to be used towards capital on this project. So, total project on this, there's two pieces again. The second resolution is for the inspection portion, the first one's for the construction. Total project cost came in at $81,000, so very competitive. I don't know the specifics, Mr. Green, on scheduling.
They're going to start shortly after Labor Day. Order materials probably on site. There'll be a maximum of 2 weeks on site.
Yeah, so it's just going to be a 2 weeks project?
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll spend a couple weeks ordering materials, but actually 2 weeks on site once they get everything ready.
You do not anticipate any other hidden costs that could potentially arise from unknowns? I guess?
Yeah, that's always an issue when you're doing underground storm sewers. We've dealt specifically with the HOA, who has put in a number of improvements in their park over the years. We've worked directly with them to identify those. And it also is under the contract to any unknowns that they find pipes that need to be tied into this. It's under their construction contract to tie those in should they be found. But I'm relatively sure we've identified all of them. But if they do find any, it'll be on the contractor to tie those in.
Thank you.
Is this all happening in the north, inside the neighborhood, or is any of it?
It's going to be along the east edge of their park. It's going to start on Shore Drive near Surf, and then it's going to run straight north to the lake. There is a section that's been previously improved by some private property owners that will have to cut through a concrete cap on our way to the lake, but then we'll replace that in kind.
No disruption to Route 6 traffic?
Now, at one point, we considered running catch basins all along Shore Drive, and after going to a couple HOA meetings, it wasn't a really popular option because it would require the removal of some trees. And what we want to really capture anyway is this low spot over near Shore and Surf to drain the area. So.
Any other questions, council?
Hearing none, please call on the adoption.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Heggie.
Yes.
Next is resolution 2020-53.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Crawford.
I'd like to move that resolution 2020-53 be placed on its first reading and the three reading rule be suspended, please.
Any discussion on first reading? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Heggie.
Yes. That was a yes, sorry.
Resolution 2020-53, a resolution authorizing the city manager to accept the proposal and enter into an agreement with OHM Advisors for the provision of inspection services related to the Rye Beach Park Storm Sewer Project at a cost not to exceed $12,500.
Nothing additional, not to exceed 12.5.
Any discussion from council? Please call the roll.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Pat. Okay. Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Hagee.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is a motion. I'll let Mr. Spafford explain that.
So council's aware, we received a rezoning application, I think it was earlier this year, for property near the boat basin owned by Mr. Gary Savage. The request was to rezone the property from a B2 to a B3 on the premise to allow residential uses on the first floor of the property. Ultimately, between the planning commission and city council, that option was denied. And as a secondary path forward, the applicant, the property owner, had sought use variance, basically before the BZA, to request the ability to use the property in a way that wouldn't be in accordance with the city zoning code. And based on the criteria that were set forth that allow BZAs to approve use variances, they ultimately decided also not to grant that variance. As a way, just in trying to be as accommodating as we can to a property owner, an additional option would be to explore the potential to modify the city zoning code as a permitted use section to allow for residential uses within the property zoning district. And so as I'll say one final straw at this, a methodology could be to take a motion to recommend discussion of this modified zoning land use to the planning commission, to have that discussion, make a recommendation back to council as to whether or not this would be a minimal modification to the zoning district, or the zoning language. This is, just in terms of zoning modifications and land use development, this is typically a last straw effort, last ditch effort, just because typically when you're modifying language within a zoning district, you're affecting every single property within that zoning district. The B2 district is one of the smaller areas. It basically incorporates from Mr. Savage's property north around the boat basin, the Southport Development Building. I think there's a small portion just north of the boat basin as well. Just going off of memory, it all loosely ties back to the urban renewal plan that was adopted back in the late 60s and early 70s. So that's the legislative history in terms of how we got here. That's the proposed. With the motion would be to refer the issue back to the planning commission, technically the subcommittee of council, and being your committee that specifies the land use and zoning regulations. It would be what we'd recommend. But go ahead, Mr.
So this goes to the planning commission, and then they will ultimately vote on it, or make a recommendation back to us to vote on it.
Yeah, so this would be a modification to the zoning language as opposed to just applying specifically to Mr. Savage's property. And so the way our code lays out zoning code regulations is that city council makes a recommendation to the planning commission for them to discuss it. Planning commission would discuss, make a recommendation back to city council, for city council to ultimately accept, modify, or reject that recommendation.
And where else is B2 in the city limits?
I'll get a specific map for you guys, but it's really condensed right there in that section, right around the boat basin, I-5s, Southport, Anchor Point building. It's right in that area, the boat basin. It's one of the smaller zoning districts in the city.
And this is the only one?
Yes.
This is the only B2 we have, correct?
It's only B2. Yeah. It's all consolidated right there.
I printed out a copy of the, I mean, it's pretty small in that area, so you need to really zoom in on that to get it better, but, it looks like there's one of those spot down south of Maine, I don't know, I can show you. If somebody wants to look at this afterwards, obviously we'll have time to review it a little more.
There's a very small section, you're correct, by South Main that I believe is the pizza restaurant and like the 2 or 3 parcels around it.
Oh, around, yeah,
Okay.
well, the pizza house, probably that. That's what it was
Exactly,
like.
but the
Okay.
majority of it is literally surrounding the boat basin there along Main
So-
Street.
Coming, Matt's Pizza House. And there's a
Yeah.
few little houses
Pizza
back
house.
behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Schmidt, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just 2 quick items. Mr. Becky asked a question about process. I think it's fair to sprinkle in the chapter 1139 of our ordinances dealing with this, would be a public hearing or 2 involved in that process as well. And also, Mike, for you to verify, it's my understanding that there are some grandfathered uses where there's residential use on the first floor already in the B2 district.
Very well could be.
Second floor.
It's second floor.
Excuse me, is it second floor?
Yeah, they already have grandfather use on the second floor of that property. Correct, Doug?
Correct.
There was a grandfather use.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Cox.
I make a motion that we refer this issue to planning commission to be brought up at their next meeting to discuss and make a recommendation back to council.
Discussion on motion. Please call the roll.
Klaus,
Yes.
Martino,
Yes.
Wright,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Hagy,
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next is resolution number 2020-54.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the three reading rule be suspended and resolution 2020-54 be placed on its first reading.
Discussion on placing on first reading. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dyke,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Hagy,
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus,
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Resolution number 2020-54, a resolution for the interim city manager to authorize the purchase of a fire engine from Advantech Service and Parts LLC in an amount not to exceed $295,000.
Thank you. So this is going back to the city's joint service agreement with Huron Township Fire Department. I think modified in 2017 or 2018. Going forward, the two parties came together, decided to jointly acquire all capital equipment. And so following that, this is the first major purchase, or second major purchase, I should say. We purchased the third ambulance last year. The expenditure for this was included in 2020's budget. The way we routed it due to certain state pricing processes, it made most sense that the township actually approved the purchase agreement last year. This is basically the final authorization for the city to expend the funds and shooting them back over. It's in accordance with the city's joint services agreement with the township that speaks to capital acquisition. So as I said, the funds basically were sequestered in last year's, included within this year's budget, and then the actual fire engine's been under production here for the last 12 months or so. Actually hopeful if we haven't got notification delivery potentially.
Potentially by September 1st, we're hoping for. So they're was ahead of schedule, and they've had a couple issues with COVID, and we've got bumped up, moved back down, moved around a little bit, but we're hoping by September 1st.
Just out of curiosity, does this replace something?
It is replacing our oldest engine, which is 26 years old. They recommend a 20-year life on engines, and this one's made at 26. It's outdated. It's going to bring us more in line with what we have currently. We'll increase in our tank capacity from 500 to a 750 tank. And it also, this truck, the one we're replacing the valves on are electric pneumatic, and they don't make those valves anymore. So we are making them the best we can to keep it running. So, but it is definitely outdated and needed.
So does this have any further capabilities to allow, as far as services that it provides?
Services, it's going to bring us more in line as far as operationally with the 750 tank versus the 500. That allows us to do some different things. It gives us a little bit more time, to establish water supplies. That is what our current engine over here has. The newest engine we have over here was 750. So operationally, it helps out a lot of ways. Compartment size is going to be a lot easier, or a lot bigger. They make everything bigger nowadays than smaller, so that will allow the equipment to go in there easier, access easier, lower hose bed, so safety reasons of guys climbing up on top type deal. It's a high truck, but it sits low.
So what do you do with the old engine? Sell it?
Yes, we haven't decided on that. We've talked about the gov deals. They will not take the truck in on trade, so there's nothing we can do there. There are companies out there that purchase used fire engines and stuff, but we're not sure what we get for it or anything, so.
Thank you.
Like, was there anything like budgeted for any residual value on that, or it's just that it's completely?
Yeah, we just assumed, yeah, we didn't assume it, right, it's driving off though.
I'm smiling under it. Be a watering meter.
Yeah, there you go.
Special nozzle.
500 gallons doesn't do that. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Will this be at the township? Is it where will this be located?
I believe this one will be at the township, yes.
The new.
We haven't really established that until it gets here and we start to figure out everything, but that is the plan as of right now. Because we've had the newest one here since we got it.
I want to say thanks to the township for being a part of this and half the cost, so thank you.
And any other discussion? Let's call the roll for final adoption.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Hagy.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Martino.
All right, next on the agenda is city manager discussion.
Thanks, Tarantino. So I wanted to provide, and I apologize, I had a management activity report drafted and I just didn't get it up front, so I'll send it out at the meeting as well. But just a couple things of note specifically, phase 2 of Route 6, we had a really good discussion with ODOT early last week. Presented a packet of information to them that included a couple of conceptuals. I believe, if I haven't shared those with council, they're part of this report. There's two considerations that we included. Would be one, creating an actual intersection at Jim Campbell Route 6 right near the high school entrance. That would provide Jim Campbell access to both west and east onto 6 once they get off. The other would be, which I would say is definitely a less ideal solution, would be just to provide westbound access off of Jim Campbell directly onto US 6, but we're obviously pushing forward with option 1 best we can. I would say ODOT's reception was overall positive. They wanted to have some discussion internally just to get back some feedback and commentary. They look at things generally from a data perspective in terms of conflict points, and so once they see the creation of a new intersection, they start to look at how other intersections can be modified to reduce conflict points. So I anticipate some additional commentary or feedback in terms of ways we can do that, and we're working to help to mitigate that discussion as best as possible. So hopeful we'll get some feedback from them this week and follow up with that discussion. But that is moving along. We had a finance committee meeting last night, did a presentation on the latest round of financial information relative to our COVID projections that we put out earlier in the year. Again, these are the monthly updates that we've been issuing out of Corey's office. Get these out to the council as a whole as well. Overall, still seem to be holding the line, but for a few revenue sources that we kind of anticipated. Gas tax, obviously, with tourism season being as low as less activity this year, we've seen a pretty drastic drop on that end, and court activity, which usually subsequent to tourism season, has also been fairly reduced. But for the most part, obviously the revenue source of most concern, the income tax, it seems to perform fairly well. I think we're 5 to 10% below what our budget was, but getting good indications from Rita that we, based on the filing, the July deadline, we could actually be almost close in line with what our budget was through this part of the year. So definitely encouraging signs on the financials. On that end, we did talk loosely about the 2021 budget process. We have started setting up internal staff meetings with all our department heads to start to put those operational plans together for next year. Included within the management activity report when I send it out here, we are putting together an interactive tool for city council this year as part of the city budget process creation. Basically, it's a worksheet and a workbook for council to give you guys real-time information that essentially a slew of options to try and simplify as opposed to getting into the nitty-gritty of every opportunity to see how those certain decisions impact the city's finances going on long term. We have a bill based on a 5-year projection right now, and yeah, I wanted to get this information to council a lot sooner. Just it took a while to put this tool together, but once you guys see it, I think you'll really like it. Hopefully, it helps facilitate. And then back to the bigger point of I think I've talked about it before, but from the budget process specifically, is trying to build council's goals, policies, objectives into the first part of the budget season as opposed to towards the end. So that's an exciting piece. Had a good conversation with the U.S. Economic Development Administration relative to CARES Act funding for capital improvement projects. We talked loosely about the Con utility project as well as Salmo Parkway. I would say both received fairly positive feedback. Each has its own pros and cons within it. I had asked if it would help or hurt to apply for both at the same time, just to get the feedback, and the indication I got was that every project they're looking at right now is on its own merit, and that they're pretty much on a rolling basis, and until the funding runs out, they're just accepting applications. And so, preferred timeline for them was to try and get it in as soon as possible. I recommend within the next month or two. So we're expediting those processes with OHM to get those grant applications finished out. Again, just a reminder on the Solomon Parkway job, that's about a $1.8 to $2 million construction, and the Con utilities is roughly $750,000 to $850,000 project. The one piece I did want to mention as well, the funding breakdown on that is 80-20, and so obviously potential large share of that. We are going after Ohio Public Works Commission dollars for public infrastructure grants for Solomon Parkway as our next round of applications. And we did confirm you can combine state and federal funding programs. So if we were able to get CARES Act funding for Solomon Parkway, we could potentially have the city's match via the OPWC round if we were to be successful in that application as well. So that's the strategy there. Last piece is AMT discussion relative to the sale of substation assets, or the transmission assets of the substation. We did receive comments back from them on Friday to our initial red line, and so we're just going through the minutia of those. Todd and I had a lengthy discussion today about those, and so I'm definitely optimistic that we can have something to council here wrapped up pretty soon. Hopefully shoot the second meeting in August. So if we can get that wrapped up, that's definitely an encouraging sign. And then the very last thing I have, so Mr. Dan Frederick, the local architect, had asked, met with him earlier this afternoon to discuss the potential for an outdoor seating patio. It would be an expansion of the old fish house patio onto the Showboat property. And so, just knowing where things are at with the legalities of the property, this is technically, it falls in line with a lot of the regulations we set forth in the outdoor seating program that we had set up earlier in the year relative to COVID-19. In an effort for full transparency, I just wanted to get council's feedback on this one. And then, Joe, too, just the opportunity, if you had, I think between you and Dan might understand the project specifics a little better. I do have site plans, I don't know if you think it'd be helpful to pass out, just to let everyone get an idea of what piece of the property is being discussed.
Mr. Frederick approached me a couple weeks ago and said, you should try and gain some expansions just so, because people want to be outside, it's been beautiful weather out. We should ask the city. He said that he would put together something to provide more clarity and let it look a little more professionalism rather than my sketching. So, the thing would, part of that fence would come down, or have to put up a temporary fence. This would obviously have to go to the liquor control for approval, and it would just allow for me to be able to space out and allow some of that space to be used. My question to Mike was, is there some type of compensation that the city wants? Obviously, I want to be very transparent. If the council says no, we don't want to go on with that, I'm fine with that. It's just wanted to ask. So down there over the past several months, it's been very busy and it's gaining a lot of attention. So thanks for the consideration.
Anything from my recommendation?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things. I think in looking at actually there are two ordinances, the one that was passed earlier this year, and then prior to our involvement, there was another ordinance that passed regulations and some considerations, requirements for outdoor use that relate to safety and whatnot. candidly, I'll speak very bluntly, I don't think we necessarily have to go through this step of presenting this and discussing it tonight, but I absolutely think it's in the interest of transparency, Mr. May. I appreciate your comments on it. I think by virtue of those two ordinances, we've authorized the city manager or the city manager to give this consideration, but I absolutely do appreciate the fact that we're here tonight. I think the prior two ordinances address this. The other thing I contemplate is, we have a quiet title action going on. There's been paving and some, I don't want to use the word improvements, but some enhancement to the site. And I think the largest concern in the quiet title action would be to any additional improvement per se in any analytical sense, any further improvement to the property. Here, I think what's being requested is consistent with the ordinances that have been passed historically. Subject to safety, subject to ODLC, subject to, further discussions, insurance and things of that sort. I think which is fairly typical concerns for any business owner in the city.
I would like to also, this will only be till November 1st, and then I'm closing that place down, and everything will be off there, everything will be put back. And we are also working on the property line issue.
Yes, we are.
So,
Yes, indeed.
there's still steps that need to be taken. Hopefully we have that resolved here soon too.
Yes, and let me address that. We are evaluating the maps that were received, and we are also going to market to obtain, in the event we needed another survey. I'm not sure that we do or don't. It's not going to be my decision. It will be council's decision. But at least we're prepared. I think we should make a fully informed decision of options and how to address any perceived, actual, potential, alleged encroachment, whatever the case may be. I want to make sure that when we discuss it, that we have all of our ducks in a row and costs. We do want to get a survey if it's even necessary. Mr. Beck, I just don't know how that's going to proceed, but we'll take it one step at a time.
So I just have one quick, the fence on this would only be accessible through Fish House,
Yes,
not from Craftsman.
correct.
When we've done in the past, recent past, when we've granted these outdoor temporary licenses, fair assessment, what is the land being utilized by these other, is it parking spaces, is it right of ways from?
So relative to the one that we did for COVID specifically, this is
Yeah.
actually only the second application. The only other one was Lemmy's, and it was to reuse their own parking area. So for other license agreements, specifically for reuse of city property, it's usually signage is a prominent one. And then I-5s is probably the most applicable, I would say, from a comparison standpoint, but that's more for permanent improvements. That's a lease where the city leases the property too. It's definitely an option, just would take a little bit more time. It might make, from an insurability standpoint, I could see Joe having issues getting insurance unless there's clear, let's say, delineation of ownership of the property without some type of lease, but I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to be an insurance expert on this, but does that answer?
Again, I didn't realize we only had the other.
Yeah, there's very few, it's been underutilized, I would say.
Any other questions on this issue? Mr. Spafford, do you want to talk to these on the transient rental?
Oh, yeah, I apologize. This is also in the management activity report, so there's, I should be able to places, those are business cards for the county. That's actually the staff member, Heather Walters, who's leading the tax collection efforts. And she, at her request, basically asked that we give those out to all the transient property owners as they sign up for the certificates. And then I'll highlight as well the vet tax collection procedures for those bookings that have been done prior to the city's enactment of the vet tax. Basically, it would be that anything going forward would be subject to the vet tax starting after it was May 1st, or correct me if I'm wrong. Are there any other specifics, Corey, if you wanted to touch on?
No, I don't know if all the procedures are passed down.
Yeah, they'll be attached to it, but
No, the cards you have in front of you mainly just like Mike said too, and also if anyone does have any questions on those procedures or bed tax filings in specific, I know Mr. Haggett, that you're the one who brought it up last meeting, specifically people asking you questions. If you're not comfortable answering everything, just give them that card, and she's willing to answer everything. She's got those procedures as well, like we discussed last meeting.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, question. How many registered units do we have now?
We're close to 50, I believe, the last time I checked. And,
42 as of last week.
yeah, and then we have between Thursday, when our inspector will be back, and into next week, we have several that are scheduled for inspection.
And we suspect there were 200, is that correct? Do I remember that number right?
So
That's what the anticipation was at the beginning, I remember.
Yeah.
We anticipated around 200 units.
One of the systems, just to give you an example, that we're looking into is Granicus. They go out and they peruse, I think it's 26 different online rental websites. And they did a kind of a quick dive into the city of Huron for presentation purposes. Corey and Christine and myself were there for the presentation, and they found, as of, I don't know, Corey, 3 weeks ago, I think we had the meeting, there was like 107 currently being listed. And it's one of those things that we're looking into, because what they would provide to the city is a spreadsheet database, names, addresses, who's renting, and also copies of the actual advertisement, where then we can send that out to those folks, give them a certain amount of time to sign up, and then if not, we can turn it over to the city's prosecutor, and it's got the evidence right there with it. So that is something we're looking at. Because one of the problems is when you go on those websites, you'll see the pictures of a living room. Very occasionally, you'll see the pictures of the outside of the house, but there's no address listed. So unless you know which property that is, it's kind of difficult to figure all that out. This would provide that for us. And like I said, they went through real quick just for the purposes of our meeting, and they had like 107, and that was late July. So.
Hey, Mr. Dykes, just to answer your question, as of yesterday, we receipted 43 units for payment.
Thank you.
Mr. Spear, do you want to say anything about the request for buoys and what?
Oh, okay, I apologize. We had received a request from Mr. Keezy within the, I apologize, what's the? Thank you, yeah. Condo association relative to a no-wake sign and buoy placement within Mudbrook Creek. Back in 2018, the city's application for the ODNR Navigational Aid Grant Program was for both in front of, I believe it was in front of Nickel Plate, and also for Mudbrook Creek. We received a grant for the ones in the open lake, did not receive the grant for the ones within Mudbrook Creek. So I had a follow conversation with the grant manager at ODNR this morning. Basically, the two options, we could proceed with refiling the grant applications to November 1st as the deadline. Funding would be in place and potentially have buoy delivery next year if we were successful in the grant application. We can move forward at our own cost to do those as long as the buoys themselves are approved by ODNR, and so that actually we could apply for the approval right now. So rough cost, I don't know, just a couple $1,000 would be just off the cuff in terms of how much it would be. Talking with Maritino, good suggestion would be to partner with the Huron Port Authority on potential just as a project for them to endeavor. In terms of buoy pyramid placement within the channel, so something to consider at least. But at least that's where things are at right now. We can move forward with another round of grant applications in November, or we can move forward now under our own. Yeah.
What about signage? Because I know there's been some other individuals on, I can't remember the exact neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a similar request. We had looked, I believe it was designated based on the legislative trail we were able to find. It was designated as a no-wake zone. I think you fit back into the early 90s. And so I think the hardest part, just from a geographic standpoint, would be actually where to locate the signage. The terrain back there is a little difficult. Maybe we do it for sure, and obviously the cost of the sign would be on our own. Property placement would be another potential hurdle. We just want to make sure whoever we work with, obviously we get access to be able to place the sign, maintain it, and get to it.
At did talk to us that last round of grant applications, and I inherited what you started with the buoy grant application on the safety committee your term prior. Is there a neighborhood that wanted to jump in and they came late to the party?
Yeah, Chaska.
And we
So-
said next round?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna bring up since it came up, is Chaska, came in late in
Right.
getting approval, so last fall, we got approval, but
No buoys.
no buoys.
Yeah,
So we
do
we
want,
need to get, Chaska needs to get in
yeah, to this
the,
round, so we do want to pursue.
for the 5 buoys that we place. Ours are in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, so we
There's
do
a lot of
need to
things that
pursue
could
that grant
contest.
again to get.
They're still
one.
floating, but they're
Yeah.
they're way down.
And I think maybe, Keith, if I might, at one time you kind of did an inventory, because we might have some buoys going bad. We were trying to use the best of what we had. And I think it was a similar conversation, wasn't it? So the next round will apply for 3, 5, whatever.
Correct.
And try to update the equipment, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we'll need to do a safety committee meeting sometime, not urgent, but, I would say maybe 1st of September. Please?
Is there a deadline for those
November
applications? Oh, that's
The applications aren't out yet. So something.
to
That
you.
should be on that for you.
Yeah, but if we go to September, first part of September, please?
So, I mean, you can make a note of it for your notes, Terry, it's 5 for Chaska.
We already have a placement for that.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, anything else for the city manager?
Just, could we talk about the railroad closures?
Yeah.
I know, to root canal.
No, it's fine. Yeah, me, we share the frustration. You know, it's one of those things, as a railroad town, this happens, and, you know, you talk to the guys, especially within the emergency services, it's usually last minute notification, you know, little control. On this one, what's frustrating is the initial report we gave the council on what we were communicated from the railroad specifically was that no more than one crossing would be closed at any one point in time. We explained to them, obviously, we would appreciate that because it would put us in quite a predicament in the event that it was. And so obviously Monday when we came in and realized they were all closed, it was quite a surprise to us. I had conversations with them, some of our fire department personnel had conversations with them. We employed ODOT to get involved through State Route 61 to try and get some feedback there. Unfortunately, obviously we didn't prevail. Thankfully, it's a short-term issue and we were able to get through it without any significant issues. But you can imagine the lack of comfort that the fire department and police department personnel have just from being bifurcated from that part of their service territory for that amount of time. So, yeah, a definite level of frustration on our end. And like I said, thankful we got through it without any significant issues. But if we can avoid that in the future, that would be ideal.
Right, I mean, what kind of contingency do we have? I mean, can we go plant a truck or a crew? I mean, I don't even know how to handle that.
We had a lot of those conversations internally for what you do. Honestly, it's just, there really is no good answer. It's unfortunately, it's expanded response time. I mean, nothing significant because of Route 2's existence and with Main Street still being open, nothing's to the point where it's inaccessible. It adds time, which could be, we enjoy across our entire fire service area, response time is 3, 4, 5 minutes, which beat most national averages by a pretty substantial amount. So we're already in a luxurious position from an emergency response time frame. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Well, I guess I have one question,
Yeah.
probably appropriate here. Do we have, and maybe this is a question for Mike and or Todd, do we have any anticipated timeline for the transit rental changes to be presented back to us for discussion?
I talked to Amelia today actually about that because told that it's soon. I've asked for a hard deadline, and when I receive that, I think what I'll do is share it with council. But I literally checked in with her this morning, and I'm fortuitous.
Okay.
Because I knew it was going to come up. She is working on it, and, you know, I think there was some consideration in her mind as to the state of the season, where we're at, and also seeing to it that it's done comprehensively, you know, and she has the notes and from all the committee activities, she wants to make sure that it's very sharp. But I also know we want a deadline, a reasonable deadline, so we can start.
Yeah, and at this point, obviously, being done right is probably most critical, given that we're pretty much at the end of the season anyway. Maybe if it was, you know, April or May, then we would need to get it done right now, but
Yeah, I don't want it, I'd like it to be a
it's gotta be correct. Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
Per the correspondence that we had, I don't mean to put you on the spot, you may not know this off the top of your head, but as per, is it even a viable solution to restrict number of dogs or size of dogs from the city standpoint? I mean, that the correspondence was reaching out for help, and I don't even know if we're allowed to help.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that. I imagine there are already ordinances on the books that dealing with.
Yeah, there's a leash ordinance that would at least regulate dogs outside of, within public property and things, but I mean, specifically for that issue, I don't know if you require fences, if you're gonna allow dogs with, I don't know that, I mean, just from an administrative standpoint, it'd be impossible to enforce it. Like dog regulation within a transit.
If you could just
Yeah,
ask them,
and I will, and I think also, you know, we're looking at owners of these properties, it's their risk if they want to allow 2 or 3, as long as what's happening there is not in violation of our ordinances on pets and leash laws and things of that sort. I think really the owner's taking the risk. But I don't know if that even came up at any of the committee meetings, but I can ask her to give it a little bit of color, to give it some consideration.
I read that correspondence as, could you do something to regulate this? And I don't think she meant just leash laws, I think she
No.
meant.
Yeah, and without additional research, I just feel, my gut says we have to look at that. That has to be something that's consistent with the city overall to enforce on all owners, you know, transit or otherwise. But I think it's a great question, and I think it's responsive to the inquiry also. But I'll ask for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is mayor discussion. The only thing I'd like to do is, once again, I'd like to thank our citizens for their patience with all the construction going on. I think we can all agree that it'll be very nice when it's completed. So thank you for your patience. And nothing else, so for the good of the order, Mr. Harding.
Nothing, Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Hagee?
Just a couple housekeeping. Can we get an update on the city manager search committee? When you get someone who's involved, just where are we in general? Nothing specific.
Tomorrow evening, we're going to conduct some interviews, and we'll have more to report hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll have some candidates in front of you guys to entertain.
How many candidates do we get?
So we have a total of 20, I believe, and then we'll narrow it down. There's some very strong candidates, and we're going to discuss some things with some individuals, and then we're going to, you know, see if, you know, if they fit what we feel confident group to pass along to you guys, or if we need to go back out and continue to interview.
How many of you are down to Jim?
I believe it's 8 to 10.
It's 10.
And then, as a follow-up from last week, do you happen to know, or Joe, do you know if the township was presented
The township,
to USGS from the consultant that
so the Port Authority did have a meeting. Teresa Spencer did come in, present, reiterating a lot of the points that she made to us. John Zimmerman was there. The trustees were not able to attend the meeting. John recommended that we, myself and Rob Moore, come to the next meeting and discuss, you know, kind of give them an overview of everything. That's, I believe, the beginning of September. And the one question, or not the question, but the comments was, you know, I think you should talk to them, and then they'll be able to give you feedback, and then we can report it back to the council.
I thought you said she was going to talk to the township, or present to the township.
She tried, but there wasn't something, and with all the restrictions with the COVID, they wanted, they didn't have anything quick enough to set up.
And then the only other thing I have is, I just want to express my condolences to the Jones family. Bob Jones Sr. passed away this past week. Mr. Jones was a lifelong resident at Huron. In fact, his father ran the street department for quite a while, and he had some colorful stories about helping him with the streets. Back then, they were probably paved, I'm guessing. You know, just an incredible guy. He took a family farm from a small family farm to an international business. Employs hundreds of people in the local area, and for those of you who knew him, I think you'd agree he's going to be missed. That's all I have.
Right, Mr. Crowe?
Thank you, Mr. Hagee. That's a nice tribute to the Jones family. I also want to ask for the city's patience and agree. The Route 6 project gets frustrating. I think the worst of it is over. Having the front row seat that we have, talking to some of those guys on occasion, the center lanes were definitely the bigger part of the project. So I think we're over the hump. It's going to be amazing when it's done. So Doug, my hat's off to you keeping it together. Thank you. The railroad crossing thing, if we run into that again, I don't know, we can't head it off, they're gonna do what they wanna do, but as soon as we're aware to communicate with the community that that's happening, I got a couple different calls on that. And I also my husband and I do not have children, so, the household by household crisis that we're gonna face with the school situation, asking for patience and understanding from all of the community to help those families that are dealing with that and ride through this thing. So that's all I have.
I was gonna ask also what Joel asked about the update on the manager search. I didn't know, is there, at this point, any anticipated, like, dates when you think you'll be sending it back to us, or when we think we should be trying to make a decision by?
We actually have 2 dates for interviews, and that's tomorrow night and next Monday. So I imagine the committee will meet them after that as soon as possible.
Probably in September sometime. Come back to us. Or beginning of September. Thank you.
Just to kind of piggybacking that, can I ask, are we picking up travel expenses for interviewees? No.
First round interviews are just virtual.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So just for the benefit of the group.
Thank you.
I'd also like to give my condolences to the Jones family. They have done a lot of great things for this community, along with Mr. Jones. So again, my condolences. Thank you.
All right, there is no request for executive session, so a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Mr. Mayor, I make motion we adjourn.
Please call the roll.
Klaus?
Yes.
Martina?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hagee?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.